Good afternoon and welcome to the Virginia Association of Wetland Professionals last spring 2021 Lunch and Learn webinar. We have the 2021 regulatory update from the Corps of Engineers, and we also have our annual business meeting afterwards. But first, get into the regulatory update. Tom Walker is with us again today. We're honored to have him again. A little bit about Tom. He is the chief of the Norfolk office. He has also been the chief of the Wilmington District and the Asheville District. He has been from the coast to the mountains. He has a great perspective on what he does, and I'm going to pass it off to him.
All right, thanks, Laura. Can you hear me okay? All right. Okay, so you should be able to see slides now. We on? Okay.
Yep, Tom, we can see and hear everything. Looks great.
Perfect. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, I think another way to put that is that I've been around long enough to be really confused about things. But hopefully today we'll provide a little bit of clarity. Several things have happened since last we talked. I think last spring, with the CEQ's changing of the promulgation of the new NEPA implementation regulations. We have a new 401 regulation. The Corps has reissued some of the nationwide permits, and we have the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. But I think the thing that we wanted to focus on most today were the 16 new nationwide permits. So we're going to go through those. Before I get started, I do want to introduce a couple more folks that are online, kind of as my phone a friend when we get to questions. Melissa Nash, who's a project manager in our eastern section, but Melissa was also the Corps Norfolk District lead on getting through the reissuance of the nationwides. Also Jennifer Fry, who is the chief of our western permits section, and Jennifer was involved with that reissuance as well and helping Melissa out there. And then Wes Hudson, who you all know, and Wes is in our southern section in the Richmond office. Is one of our project managers that works extensively with the nationwides and can also probably field some questions on the Navigable Water Protection Rule if those come up. I've got a presentation here that Melissa actually put together for our staff briefing. So lots of slides, lots of information on the slides. I'm going to do my best not to just sit and read these to you, but we'll flash through. I'll kind of hit the high points and then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So just to put kind of a context on this before we start, the EPA issued the new 401 implementation regulations. They became effective last September, clarified some of the process that have been in place through the statute and revised the process a little bit. Then back in October, we requested DEQ to give us a final certification on the new nationwides that we had proposed back last year. I would anticipate that some of that interaction is going to be the source of many of the questions that we get today. Overall, we've been working with DEQ, and I think both agencies are very committed to where environmental protections are not compromised, to make sure that the administrative burden is lessened as much as appropriate. As we work through these to understand the certification process, to understand some of the conditions that were imposed this time around. Like I said, our goal is to make these as easy as they can be to get through. More of these 16 nationwide permits will take individual 401 certifications than have in the past. We know that was part of that general certification process. What we're really trying to do now is work to understand the general certification conditions more clearly so that we can provide more information on which do and which don't. But overall, like I said, we know that more will. So I would encourage you, first of all, to to be sure you're reading those conditions very carefully, the general conditions and the 401 general cert conditions on these new 16 nationwides. Also, I would say, and this is kind of in anticipation of some of the questions we're probably going to get, probably the cleanest way to approach these for right now is to, where you have one of these 16 nationwides, submit the general permit applicant, the JPA, as you normally would for any permit. That way we've all got the information, we're all looking at the same thing. If that individual certification is needed, it allows us to kind of, but allows us definitely to both DEQ and the Corps to provide better guidance on the individual certifications. But until we can get some better clarifying information out, I would say that's probably the best advice for now, is to submit your request on that through the JPA process. So now we'll just go through the nationwides or through the slides here. There we go. So these are the 12 existing nationwides that were reauthorized with this last effort. I will mention that the remaining 40 nationwides that were issued in 2017 remain in place as they were issued in 2017. So there has been no change yet on any of those. So the process that you were going through last year for those 40, it's the same process now. But these were reissued and replaced. We also issued 4 new nationwides, 2 dealing with mariculture activities and 2 basically as an expansion of or in replacement of part of Nationwide 12. Up until this reissuance, all utility line activities were covered under Nationwide 12. With this reissuance, we split those activities such that some basically oil and gas pipelines are covered with Nationwide 12, but then Nationwide 57 is for electric utility and telecommunication activities, and Nationwide 58 is for utility line activities for water and other substances. Some of the big changes with this reissuance, and this once again only applies to the 16, or actually only applies to those specified down there below. We did remove the 300-foot limit as a threshold limit and just went with the half acre. That's the absolute threshold on the nationwide permit itself. So no longer do you have that cap of 300 linear foot. It's just a half acre threshold. We did add as part of a condition of the nationwide the requirement to mitigate for impacts that are over 3/100ths of an acre when you're dealing with impacts to stream bed. And this was, when we proposed to get rid of the 300 linear feet, there were many concerns over that. And this was kind of the where that shook out was we added this condition to the nationwides that for impacts over 3/100ths of an acre, you would be required to mitigate for stream bed loss. When PCNs are required, you are required to submit a mitigation plan for impacts that exceed 1/10 of an acre, 300 linear feet, or that 3/100ths of an acre. Sorry about that. So I mentioned this already. Nationwide Permit 12 was separated into, well, utility lines were separated into 3 separate nationwide permits. Now what was in the past covered under Nationwide 12 is now covered potentially under one of these different nationwides, either 57 or 58. So we've been over this information. This just goes over what specific activities can be authorized under Nationwide 12. And once again, you see that half acre, there's a cap at a half acre loss for a single complete project. So Nationwide Permit 12 still authorizes access roads. As far as notification requirements under Nationwide 12s, one is anytime that there is a Section 10, and that's the Rivers and Harbors Act, Section 10 permit required. That is specifically when crossing traditionally navigable waters or navigable by law waters, those water bodies that you traditionally think of as important to transport of interstate commerce. whenever one of those permits is required. And remember that that's not just in, but it can be over or under those water bodies as well. So utility line or pipelines across those, or even directional board under those. One thing that I will mention as a regional condition to that, we did add a PCN requirement if the activity involves greater than 1/10 acre of mechanized land clearing in a forested wetland. These are the activities potentially authorized under Nationwide 57 for electric utility lines and telecommunications. Once again, that ½ acre threshold. Some of the specific activities. Notification requirements similar to Nationwide 12 if a Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act permit is required for crossing a navigable water. Discharges is resulting in the loss of greater than 1/10 of an acre of waters in the United States. And again, that regional condition requiring notification if they're greater than 1/10 of acre mechanized land clearing in forested wetlands. And then Nationwide 58, utility line activities for water and other substances. And some of the specific activities, and similar to Nationwide 57, these are some of the highlight conditions for Nationwide 58. And again, that 1/10 acre mechanized land clearing PCN threshold. The next one we'll touch on is just Nationwide 48, which is for shellfish and mariculture activities. I'll just say here that this was an existing nationwide. It was reauthorized. There aren't many substantive changes to that nationwide. So if you're familiar with that nationwide from past activities, basically it's the same. So we'll take specific questions, but that's probably about what I'll say on that. Nationwide 55 is one of the new ones for seafood or seaweed mariculture activities. To my knowledge, we haven't had a request for these yet in Virginia, and I don't know when or if we will, but this is what that nationwide potentially authorizes. Important to note that Nationwide 55 is for those Rivers and Harbors Act navigable waters only. So these are contemplated to be offshore and in larger water bodies. Nationwide 56 is very similar. It's for finfish mariculture activities. Once again, the same general information there. So this is just breaking down some of the procedures if you had a pre-construction notification that was currently under review when these came into place but hadn't been authorized. You should be working closely with your project manager, but basically if the PCN requires all the information that we needed, it can be rolled over to the new nationwides. Some of this other information, like I said, this was something that Melissa had developed for staff that I stole. So some of it is specific to staff where it references ORM. That's all stuff we worry about that you don't have to. So this is just information. Once again, some of this is more staff specific, but just if we did have an authorization that was issued under the 2017 nationwides that either because of the time limits on those, it defaulted to issuance, or even if someone is seeking to reissue it under the new nationwides, we can certainly entertain that. This goes over some of the grandfathering activity. There's also some explanation of the grandfathering activity in regulation that issues these. But basically, if you had a nationwide under the 2017 issuance of one of these 12 that were reissued, if you were authorized under the 2017 and you or at least under contract to commence work, then you're grandfathered for 1 year. So you can continue to work under that. If you were not at least under contract, or you anticipate not being able to complete the project within a year, you would need to get verification under the new Nationwides. This is just getting some of that stuff. So with the 2017, as I've already mentioned, those 40 that were not re-verified under this most recent action that were issued in 2017 remain in place, and there has been no change. So business as usual on those for now. As you know, those do expire February next year. So we did, when the Corps proposed to reissue, from the national level proposed to reissue, they proposed the whole suite. We only reissued the 12 and the 16 new this time, but we're in the works to get the rest of these renewed certainly by that expiration date. But for right now, it's just business as usual on those. This is just something specific to our regional conditions, but and the 401 water quality certifications. As I said, we worked with the state to understand the conditions on the general certification, and are now working with them to try to determine what of these new Nationwides will require an individual certification and which can be covered under that general certification. We were on a call just this morning I think we're close to having a solution, or at least some information we can put out there. But for right now, like I said, the best advice is just to apply, use the joint permit application for any request for authorization under those 16, and that way we can better advise what the process is for your individual activity. So this just goes over but this information you can also glean from looking at the general conditions in the 401 general cert, as well as the regional conditions on the Nationwide, when we would need to coordinate that individual certification. Like I said, there are some of these that more of these activities will require an individual 401 certification than historically. So with that, I know that was kind of a quick run through, but I did want to leave plenty of time for questions, and I know there will probably be a few. So I guess we will open the floor for questions now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexi. I'll start us off with our first question. Can you clarify what you mean by submit through the JPA process? Is that a matter of filling out the JPA form and submitting to the Corps as well as the state via VitaShare?
Yes. So while that's not a requirement, for right now, that's probably the easiest way to get everyone the information and to give us what we need to help guide you further in the process.
If I can, Tom, this is Jennifer Serafin. I just want to add some clarity to that for the JPA process. So yes, it's submitted. Technically, if the JPA permit application is sent to the VMRC, and the VMRC then funnels that to the Corps and DEQ, that's the process that's laid out in the permit application itself. But so when you do send it to VMRC, what we often tell folks is to go ahead and copy the Corps and your DEQ representative, and that will help that expediting perhaps through that sharing, so that the Corps and DEQ both know it's coming through the VMRC.
Thank you. This is Katie Lavanino. I had a quick follow-up to that. Is there a preference for individual person, regional office lead, or central office from DEQ that be carbon copied to the JPA submittal through the VMRC?
This is Dave. That would go to the regional office unless it's a VDOT project.
Thank you. The next question has several parts. So I'm actually I'll read it, I'll pause, and then I'll read it again, and we can take it step by step if needed. For projects conducted under the Nationwide Permit 57 that would not have historically required a submittal to the agency, less than a 10th acre of impacts, Does the Army Corps of Engineers have any recommendations for how we prepare joint permit applications that must be submitted to get DEQ authorization? Will the Army Corps of Engineers issue no permit required letters? Any information we can include in the joint permit application to make it clear to the Army Corps of Engineers that we do not expect to require an Army Corps of Engineers authorization. Tom, you want me to go through that once more?
Yes.
Okay. For projects conducted under the Nationwide Permit 57 that would have historically not required a submittal to the agency fewer than a 10th acre of impacts, does the Army Corps of Engineers have any recommendations for how we prepare joint permit applications that must be submitted to get DEQ authorization? Next part is, will the Army Corps of Engineers issue no permit required letters? Any information we can include in the joint permit application to make it clear to the Army Corps of Engineers that we do not expect to require an Army Corps of Engineer authorization.
So I think clarification number one is when you say less than a 1/10 of an acre, it's not a no permit required. There may have been a no notification requirement, but it would still technically, if it is waters of the US and there was discharge, be covered by the permit. So is the question specific to impacts to waters that are state waters and not waters of the US?
My hunch, reading in on this, and this is just a hunch, so the questioner is welcome to type in a clarification. My hunch is this is projects that likely use matting, and so they anticipate likely very few, if any, impacts. And if it's under a Nationwide 57, I believe that's utilities, correct?
Yes. So if there's no, if there's no discharge that would require authorization from us, then yes, we could issue a no permit required letter. I don't know, and Melissa or Wes, I know you guys work these, you're much closer to permit issuance than I am, but I'm having trouble kind of putting together the pieces of that question to understand exactly where we need to go.
This is Melissa. It sounds to me like if it's going to be any sort of trenching, it still needs a permit from the Corps. It just may be non-reporting. However, if they do submit a permit application, most likely when we receive an application like that, we will respond to it and we will provide verification. Now, if it's something that's going to be directionally bored under a non-tidal water, then that could truly be no permit required. I think there's just a lot of different scenarios that it could be under that question.
So yeah, I think to try to get it at some semblance of an answer to it too. That last part, especially, is any information related to the questions that we're asking. Are we talking waters of the U.S. or state waters only? So clarifying the jurisdictional extent from a geographic standpoint, but also from an activity standpoint of does the activity involve a discharge? So is it under a navigable waters that would be regulated pursuant to the Rivers and Harbors Act? If not, and it does not involve a discharge, then even though it may be in or near a water of the U.S., it wouldn't require a permit from us. So anything that would help us make those decisions as to whether or not it even requires authorization would certainly be key to put in.
One point, if I may, this is Jennifer again, to clarify too. So on the, if you have a project or you're working with a client and you are proposing a loss of waters, even if it's temporary under that nationwide, but if you look at the reporting threshold to the Corps, the no notification, so if you're less than that 1/10 of an acre. However, keep in mind, based on the new regional conditions of the 401 for that nationwide permit, in order for you to have the assurance that you are covered under that nationwide, you need to have either the 401 or the VWP or a waiver from the state in order to qualify for that nationwide. So I guess and this is where it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, and as we work through these processes, you know, as a larger group with us and DEQ, but it may be in your best interest, and I'm not trying to put more burden on everybody, but maybe just to cover the bases to make sure that you are qualified for that nationwide, is that you submit the JPA to the agencies. Even if you think that you qualify under the no notification, it may make more sense in the long run to get that coverage and confirmation from the agencies.
Yeah, and it's a good point that Jennifer makes, and I'll go back to, you know, what I said earlier, that's part of what we're working with DEQ very actively right now to try to better clarify. So I think Jennifer's spot on with the guidance for right now, but our guidance on that may be different by next week, literally. So for right now, that I would agree that the cleanest way to make sure is to submit that and let the agencies work through it on an individual basis.
So I think this is Katie again, a follow up to that question, and the answers may be similar to what you've just said. If impacts below the 1/10 acre wetland/water or 300 linear feet stream impact limits, which is below the DEQ 401 water quality certification, is it correct to say that a JPA does not have to be submitted?
So I think that's kind of what Jennifer was touching on it, and Jennifer, feel free to chime in, but at that point, you may not need to submit anything to the Corps for verification, but what we would need is, what you would need is confirmation that you meet that general condition, I think it's 13, that says that you either have to, that you have to have either a VWP or a waiver, or individual cert or a waiver. So that's where, like I said, we're working right now to try to figure out how categorically we can better clarify that.
Thank you. I have our next question. What is the process to secure re-verification under a 2017 nationwide permit when the project has not commenced construction or is not under contract?
So if it's not going to qualify for the grandfathering, then you would just need to resubmit the request under the new nationwides. I would work with your PM individually to determine how, you know, if any additional information is going to be required.
If this is a similar question, if a nationwide permit application was submitted over 45 days prior to the new nationwide permits coming out and the Army Corps representative has not commented, is this automatically approved?
So provided it meets all the caveats, was complete application and everything, and it indeed timed out such that our 45-day clock ran out, and you met the terms and conditions of the nationwide permit that was in place at that 45th day, if that was a 2017 permit, then yes. But that's, you know, there was a slide, and I won't flip back to it, but there was a slide that if you want confirmation of that, once again, I would contact the PM and see if they would need anything in addition to provide confirmation under the new nationwide. But that's not necessary. It's just if you wish to do that. Otherwise, if you met the terms and conditions at that day 45, then you could consider it authorized, but it's only good for that 1-year grandfathering. So if you're under contract to commence or have commenced work and can complete it within a year, then technically you should be okay. But if you wouldn't qualify for that grandfathering, then that permit would still expire at the end of the year.
This is Melissa. So specifically, that would be the case for the any utility lines that no longer meet the Nationwide Permit 12. So you need to be looking at those carefully. So if it was a 12, you'd submitted it as a 12, but it is now it's an overhead utility line or a sewer line or something like that, then it no longer qualifies for Nationwide 12. So you would definitely have to reapply for that unless, no, actually you would have to reapply. There's no other way you could have done it unless you were already under contract and already had started work.
So I think, and Melissa, I think this is correct. That's just to kind of summarize the answer to that is if you had applied for nationwide authorization under the 2017 nationwides and everything was complete and appropriate and the 45-day clock ran out, I'll say, during that time that the 2017 nationwide was still in place, then you by default received that 2017 nationwide and it would qualify for the grandfathering provision, which means at least under contract to commence and completed within a year. Otherwise, you would need to reapply.
I agree.
I think this is a question in a similar line. How will the Army Corps of Engineers handle a modification of a previously authorized nationwide permit if the nationwide permit has now changed, i.e. if a project was previously authorized under 12, but now the activity falls under 57? Would a new permit be issued just for the modified impacts, or would the entire project be re-verified under 57?
I had my answer all set until that last part. It depends. If you're talking, if none of the project has commenced, then most likely the entire project would need to be reauthorized, especially under a 12, because the 12 may not cover it anymore. And it's kind of a nuanced point, but a real one is we don't really modify nationwide permit authorizations. We reconfirm that the project still meets it. So that, once again reinforces that if the project doesn't still meet the nationwide 12, then it may need to be authorized under something else. Obviously, if there are parts of the project that had already been completed, then we wouldn't have to go back and capture that work. So if the modification is just something left to be done and the rest is already complete, then we would just look at the modification impacts.
Thank you. I have our next question. An attendee asked, they have received notice from the southern section of the Army Corps PMs regarding pre-filing with DEQ prior to submittal of a JPA. Is this something that should be anticipated for all submittals requiring individual certification, adding 30 days to the beginning of a permitting/review timeline?
Tom, you want me to take that one?
I do.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, big questions, pre-filing meetings. If you know your project is going to require an individual water quality certification, it is most definitely in you and your client's best interest to submit the request, the written request to DEQ for a pre-filing meeting. By regulation, there is a 30-day period between the time that you submit your request to submitting your request to DEQ for 401 water quality certification. There is no getting around that 30 days. DEQ can agree to and honor the request for a pre-filing meeting. They can ignore it, they can decline it, but that 30 days has to be built into the process. It's it's similar to what the Corps does on a pre-application meeting. So you kind of, you want to have maybe all the, at least the bulk of the kinks worked out before you submit your application. Now I know there are some instances where where applications are being submitted. The JPAs are being submitted, the Corps getting them, and now DEQ is getting them as well, but no pre-filing has occurred. And we know it's going to be an individual 401. There can be the conversation that you're having with DEQ and copying the Corps on that, counting that JPA as your pre-filing meeting request, but then that 30 days would start from that point. And if there's any follow-up to that, just let me know.
There is one follow-up. Would this process include an additional 30-day review by EPA for permits receiving 401 certification, extending the permitting review timeline by 60 days overall?
So say that again. I think I just want clarity on the very first part of that.
Sure. Would this process include an additional 30-day review by EPA for permits receiving 401 certification, extending the permitting review timeline by 60 days overall?
Okay, so yeah, to circle that. So that EPA coordination, it occurs. So the federal agency, prior to our issuing of an authorization, when we receive a copy of an issued 401 water quality certification, now this would be the ones that individual certifications, not those nationwide with general certification, but individual certifications. The Corps, the federal agency, we have 5 days to send that 401 water quality certification to the EPA for coordination, and it is their job, and they have 30 days to determine whether or not that activity will affect the water quality of a neighboring jurisdiction. That 30 days, it may not take 30 days, it may take 2, but and so to say that, yeah, on the long range planning, perhaps, yes, maybe that 30 days could be built in, but if there is that potential too for the EPA to come back and say there is a potential for a water quality concern in a neighboring jurisdiction, then that process would start with that neighboring jurisdiction. Say it would be like the North Carolina, their Division of Water Quality. So, but hopefully, we're hoping those issues don't become the norm and be, a rarity, if at all. But yeah, so yeah, that is built into that process as well.
Thank you. This may be a reiteration of what's already said. The VWP permit or waiver is only required if impacts exceed our 401 water quality certification thresholds. So if they don't, then nothing should be required from DEQ. I guess there's not so much a question in there, but could you speak to that?
So
I don't know. I'm a little confused by that statement, but Tom, go ahead.
Let me read it one more time, real quick. The VWP permit or waiver is only required if impacts exceed our 401 water quality certification thresholds. So if they don't, nothing should be required from DEQ.
I think the 1/10 of an acre and 300 linear foot threshold is identifying those projects which may require an individual certification for each activity proposed. Things under that, the VWP permit is still necessary to meet the general certification, or waiver is still necessary to meet the general certification.
Okay, our next question is, under the new regional condition 14 in Nationwide Permit 58, does the applicant need to coordinate directly with DWR for federal consistency under CZMA, or will that occur through the JPA process?
I'm gonna phone my friend Melissa for that one. I think it occurs through the JPA, but Melissa.
This is Melissa. The applicant needs to coordinate with DWR to meet regional condition 14. So oftentimes we see where the applicant has run through that state database and has done that anyway, but and this just made it formal that the applicant does need to coordinate with the state if necessary. If they run through the database and find out that it has a state listed species, then they need to coordinate with the state directly. Does that answer the question?
I think I've got a follow-up question from another person. Under General Condition 18C, non-federal permittees must submit a pre-construction notification if any species might be affected or is in the vicinity of the activity. How does the northern long-eared bat final 4D rule play into the pre-construction notification requirement? In other words, if the only listed species identified on your project IPAC results is the northern long-eared bat, are you required to submit a pre-construction notification?
Okay, Melissa, I'm gonna ask you on that one too.
So, this is Jennifer, or Melissa can chime in too, but so this is one on any of those ones with the notification requirements as they relate to the endangered species. I mean, the responsibility is on the applicant to ensure that they're complying with the ESA and thus that region or that general condition of the nationwide. And so under that 4D rule, if you go into IPAC and you do that self-certification and you believe it's a not likely to adversely affect based on that 4D rule, and that's all that there is, I mean, no, there would be not a requirement to submit the PCN if that was the only outstanding issue or potential concern. But again, and this is something I always tell the folks, that I talk to, if you want that reassurance that there is no concern with your use of that nationwide, then submit the application.
Thank you. And one more related to CZMA and species. Can you explain the new CZMA certification conditions to the extent that we haven't already answered them? We understand that VAWP searches need to be made and submitted to DWR when a state listed species confirmed within 2 miles of the project. Will the Army Corps of Engineers need to wait until response from Department of Wildlife Resources prior to any verification that the activity is authorized by the nationwide permit?
So similarly to the regional condition 13 for the 401 general certification, the CZMA, the consistency. So DEQ granted the consistency on our determination, provided that 14 was met. So we cannot verify the use of the nationwide until we have the assurance that was met. So to answer your question, in that long about Ray, is no, the Corps cannot verify the use of the nationwide until that condition is met, because that condition provides that assurance that CZMA is compliant, or the project is compliant with that CZMA.
And that condition, yes, I agree, Jennifer. And that condition does only apply if your project is within the coastal zone.
Thank you. Our next question is, what percentage increase in workload does DEQ expect due to these new requirements? And can DEQ handle this increase, or does it expect permit processing time to increase?
Hi, this is Dave. We are anticipating a doubling of our workload, at least initially. As Tom said, we're trying to see if there might be some other avenues that works within both the Corps and DEQ regulations. But for the time being, anyway, until we see if we can work something out, I think we're going to see a doubling in workload, which means it's going to take more time for us to process your JPAs.
Thank you. The next question is, if the Army Corps of Engineers representative provided the initial feedback confirming that Section 106 coordination is necessary 55 days from submission, would the project automatically qualify for approval?
That sounds like a very specific question. I would be happy to take that offline if whoever is asking wants to get up with me. I'd need to understand a little bit more about that before I gave much of an answer.
I will assign that question to you, and so you should receive it. If you don't get the individual's information, just message me and I'll make that connection offline.
Okay, great.
And it sounds like there's a related question from a different member. Going back to the 45-day regulatory timeframe, how can a permittee ensure that their project meets Section 106 or 7 conditions if it is the responsibility of the Army Corps of Engineers to coordinate with AHJs to meet those conditions? When does the 45-day clock start upon JPA PCN submittal? Question. Is it standard for applicants to be notified of staff assignments? And then let me know if you want me to reread that.
So I think I'll answer a couple and then I may ask you to reread it. So the last part first. Yes, we have hopefully a practice in place that you should be notified of whom your project manager is within, certainly within a week or two of submitting an application. If that's not occurring, let me know, and feel free to email me directly about it. Second part of the question is, remember with that 45 days, that doesn't mean you get a pass on being permitted. That, you still have to qualify for the permit, and there are permit conditions that says you can't impact and you can't jeopardize the existence of an endangered species. You can't adversely affect without going through the process a historic property, or if you find historic properties, once you start the work, you have to coordinate with it. So all those conditions still have to be met. I'm hoping we don't have a lot that are going totally uncoordinated, totally unresponded to for 45 days. But once again, if you're seeing that, feel free to contact me directly.
Great, thank you. And I guess the follow-up question is when does the 45-day clock start?
Upon our receipt of a complete request for authorization. So when we receive an authorization, we have 30 days to notify whether or not we need additional info, and then 45 days. So if within that 30 days, we notify that additional information is required, that resets the clock. At the end of that 30 days, if you haven't heard anything from us, that means we've got everything that we need. So then 15 more days later, this is at day 45, if we haven't responded, then you, provided your project meets all the terms and conditions completely of that nationwide permit, you can go to work under that nationwide permit.
Thank you. Our next question is, if a PJD was utilized to confirm the jurisdictional boundary on a subject property, and isolated or ephemeral features are included on the PJD without contesting jurisdiction, can impacts to these isolated or ephemeral features be permitted under a nationwide permit?
Yes, the short answer is yes. because with the preliminary jurisdictional determination, the PJD, we're assuming that everything is a water of the US.
As I think a follow-up to that, are upland cut ditches officially non-jurisdictional, and are there any caveats?
Okay, so that was actually, and as soon as I said what I said, I thought I should have included that caveat. That caveat is, what we look at is if we're doing a preliminary jurisdictional determination, everything on the property that meets our standard as an aquatic resource, so meets the 3 criteria to be called a wetland, or has an ordinary high water mark or high tide line. Anything that is an aquatic resource is considered a water of the US. Anything that is not, that doesn't, is considered not a water of the US. So when you say upland ditch, and we talk about this all the time, if it's a feature or trench in the property that doesn't have an ordinary high water mark or a high tide line and does not meet the 3 parameters of a wetland, then it's not an aquatic resource.
Thank you. Our next question is, does the EPA weigh in on all individual 401 certifications, or is this specific to permit or impact type?
This is Jennifer. At this point, we're so early in the process, we don't know. I think they're still trying to figure out what all they want to see and what they're going to weigh in on as far as the 401 certification goes.
Thank you. The next question is, does Department of Wildlife Resources has historically not provided review response outside of a state process? How is that being managed?
Is that related to the CZM question, perhaps, or the condition?
That's a good question. I don't have that information provided with that question.
Yeah, so I would say with the through, yeah, I mean, that's I don't know. I guess if it's related to like any of the 401 components in order to obtain that general VWP, if that would be the state process to perhaps, and Dave can correct me if I'm wrong, where if there's a process there in place with DWR. So whether or not, but for the CZMA condition, DEQ added that or had put that in there, so there must be some anticipation that DWR is going to be reviewing outside the state process.
Okay, and then I got a quick clarification. This is related to the condition to have state threatened endangered species clearance.
Yeah, so I think that's the answer you gave, Jennifer.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out, like, can you read? I guess that's the question. I'm not understanding, I guess, completely the question, because the Corps', for state listed species, our authorization is, I don't want to say we don't care about the state listed species, but, for that condition yeah, that's strictly federally listed species.
For this question, I can also assign it to Tom, and your group can reach out specifically and let me know if it doesn't have the asker's information, and I can help route that offline.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and what we can do with this one is since it is sort of a general process question, once we get that answer, send it back through you. So everybody, I guess, if you do notes or follow-ups from this, can have that answer.
Great. So I believe that that's the bulk of our question and answer series. And I just wanted to reiterate our thanks to the host, and Laura will speak a minute more on that, but also to our engineers and DEQ for being online to answer a good question and answer session. Tom and team, is there anything that these questions brought up that you wanted to take the time to clarify, or questions that maybe you hoped that we had asked that you wanted to hit on before we transition?
Yeah, easier ones. I'll just say that I appreciate the opportunity, and as we've mentioned several times, and I'll reiterate, we are actively working with DEQ to reduce the administrative burden on these. Like I said, we're very careful that this is not an attempt to lessen the environmental protection. I think that we have a pretty good, our programs mesh pretty well, have in the past here in Virginia, to provide the right level of environmental protection. What we're trying to make sure of now is that we have an unnecessary administrative bureaucratic process to get to that same level of protection that we always have had. And so I know this is sometimes difficult to work with, but anticipate there may be changes even to some of the answers that we gave today coming up in the very near future as we work to clarify some of these issues. We understand most of these questions, or all these questions, and can kind of anticipate and have been working for the solutions. We're just not quite there yet. I think we're getting very close to something, and when we develop it, we will work with DEQ jointly to put that information out to folks too, so that you know, like I said, we can reduce the amount of unnecessary, or not unnecessary, but reduce the amount of redundant work that no one needs to be doing in order to provide what needs to be provided.
Thank you. And this concludes the question and answer session. And I'd love to turn this back over to Laura Dixon-Rader.
Hey there. All right, let me share my webcam. There we go. I don't really have a slide to I don't have a slide to end things out, but that was a great, solid conclusion to, I guess I can do that there. That was a solid conclusion to our webinar series. I want to thank Tom, Melissa, Jennifer, Wes, Dave. Appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge. Also appreciate our sponsor today, which was Wetland Studies and Solutions Incorporated. And thank you very much. This is a great conclusion. And I'm supposed to say a few words about the last year with VAWP, and just that, you know, it's insignificant to, you know, everything else that happened in 2020, but this was not what I expected when I took office in November of 2019. But, you know, VAWP has a deep bench of wonderful people, and we have all adapted and grown in the past year. I think all of the Virginia Association of Wetland Professionals has met the challenge as well. We've been able to meet most of our missions of our VAWP missions. We have some creative talent in our board, our membership, and our committees. And I'm just going to talk about for a few minutes about the purpose of VAWP and that sort of thing. So, you know, I know in the past year, I kind of found myself defending science quite a bit with COVID and all the confusion and everything that was going on. But that also made me think about science as it is and, the process of it. And, when I was an undergrad, one of my very last classes that I took was a class called bioethics. And I was ready to hit those doors with my biology degree and take over the world with my degree full of concrete facts. When what I really found out was, through this class, was that I had a degree full of beeps, BEAP, which is the best explanation available at the present time. And so I was taken aback a little bit, but that class drove home the fact that you better be willing to change your mind. You better be ready to change your mind, to bring in new information in a good way, in the scientific way. Go through that process, observe, ask your questions, do the research, press and challenge that research. And that's kind of what we do. And with VAWP, we traditionally have a conference that's completely dedicated to research. And we encourage researchers, professors, students, grad students, to come join the forum, share their ideas, their projects, bounce some ideas off of us, and talk to the people who are in the field, working with this every day, and basically just to keep us in the loop of how we're getting to the best science. And through this March webinar, I do feel like we were able to present a little bit of research this year. And speaking of best science, VAWP has also traditionally had a regulatory meeting that we invite agencies and regulators to come to speak, to share their knowledge and their point of view, to update our membership on changes in regulations and that sort of thing. And this year, like this last webinar itself, this is the kind of information that we want to get out and share with the membership. So we were able to meet those two missions through hard work and dedication of VAWP, and put that new information out there, stuff that affects our daily work. And I want to thank everybody at VAWP who helped pitch in and get us into 2021, which is going to be better. The one mission that we could not accomplish was the social and network aspect of our meetings and our gatherings. Because we had plans. We wanted to do things like nature walks, just get together. Doesn't even have to be a class. Just get together, go walk around at the Great Dismal Swamp or one of the awesome trails that we have in Richmond all over the place, maybe someplace in the mountains, or maybe, if we have a place where the public's not generally allowed to be, but we could we could get 10 people on and look at something that's really incredible, then, that's kind of what we wanted to put out there. Our classes that we typically have, the mineral flatwoods class, and that sort of thing, we were not able to have that this year, but it is coming. It is going to be coming, and things are going to get better, and it's all going to happen soon. So hopefully, if we can meet in the fall, I get a feeling that we're going to need a bigger room at Lewis Ginter, because I think everybody misses the coffee talk where you're sitting around and you're able to actually talk to the regulators that you've been emailing, or get to know that graduate student that is presenting their paper on the the boards and such like that in between meetings. And I'm looking forward to maybe catching a beer, booch, soda, what have you, somewhere afterwards. But until then, everybody take care of each other. You know what to do. Drink your water, use your bug spray. Nobody wants Lyme disease around here. And we'll see everyone healthy and happy next fall. And thank you for the honor of allowing me to be your president. And now it is Katie's turn. Thank you, and take it away, Katie.
Thank you, Laura. So I'm excited to continue to serve through VAWP and, oh, that's not my battery. Whew. I got scared there for a second. But I'm really grateful to be supported by such a great group of people, and that's something that Laura mentioned. So we're going to transition over into the business meeting here shortly, but I wanted to recognize all the folks that, one, helped put this webinar together and continue to make VAWP useful to all and accessible to all. 2020 was not a year of exceptionally high overhead allowances for a lot of groups. And so VAWP made a mission to not only continue providing education and these webinars and these series, but also acknowledging some of the strain and with the need for education. And so we made everything that we presented free to not just members, but to non-members to help the community at large. So I wanted to just recognize the researchers, the regulatory and legal folks, the consultants, private industry, and others in the regulated community. And that's what makes VAWP great, is that we have this platform to communicate. It's one of the VAWP missions, is to bring together all these folks and to discuss ideas. One other thing that VAWP did was we extended 2020 membership fees automatically through 2021 as a way to say thank you for supporting us. And we are just so appreciative of all of our speakers and to the VAWP folks. And for the business meeting, we'll have Eli introduce the winners of our scholarship, and the voting results will be gone through. And then we'll go through each of the committees in order. So with that, I'm very excited to turn it over to Eli, who will present our winner for the scholarship.
Thanks so much, Katie. I appreciate it. So again, I want to reiterate what she said. It's been an interesting year, but it's been great to be involved with VAWP and participate as the education committee chair. And see all the changes that's come about and all the perseverance. So I'm really thankful to the board members, and it's been an interesting year, but it's been good. But yes, I wanted to today I want to present the recipients of the 2021 Student Scholarship Awards. VAWP has provided Student Research Scholarship Awards since 2017, or we've offered those out. Traditionally, it's an award that's offered $250 to students who are doing some kind of wetland-related research in the Commonwealth. Last year, we ended up not having any applicants, so as part of that, this year the board decided to increase the scholarship amount to $500 and try to encourage new applicants and try to get those resources out there to encourage research throughout the state. So this year we actually, I'm really pleased to announce that we had applications received, we reviewed them, and we had some outstanding applicants who provided some outstanding concepts for research. And as a result of that, the board met again, decided to vote, and we're actually going to award two scholarships this year for $500 each to help encourage these students and provide some funding for their much needed research. So with that, I'd like to announce the recipients being James Mitchell Doyle and Adam Dunn. So congratulations to those folks. Typically, when we have an in-person meeting, we acknowledge the students and have them stand. And this format's a little different, so we're not able to do that this year. But those two recipients, if you'd like to raise your hand in the chat function, we can promote you and you can say a few words, or if not, that's fine. But congratulations to you both. Just give you a little background. Mitchell Doyle, he is actually a student at Christopher Newport University who's pursuing a master's in science and environmental science. And the research that he provided was entitled An Analysis of Chemiciferous Thioides, or Atlantic White Cedar, Growth Rates in Response to Conservation Efforts in Southeastern Virginia. And this is a project that's going to examine growth rings of Atlantic white cedar in response to some ongoing conservation efforts out there towards the Cavalier Wildlife Management Area. So looking forward to seeing more research on that and seeing what will come from that. Adam Dunn is a student at Virginia Commonwealth University, and he's pursuing his master's in biology with a concentration in environmental science. And the topic he presented for the research scholarship was entitled Plant Trait Effects on Tidal Wetland Methane Emission. And in his project, he's going to be looking at the gas flux and pore water measurements in different stands of pure stands and mixed stands of tidal wetland communities to help see what might be driving some of the methane production in relation to trying to answer questions related to tidal or sea level rise and climate change. So great research topics. Looking forward to having the potential of these students presenting their research findings in upcoming meetings. But we, again, want to say thank you very much and really encourage folks in the future, if you know students, to go ahead and encourage them to apply. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Eli. And we have elections every year. Things were a little off schedule this year, so we are now closing the voting. And I'm going to turn this over to Ricky as soon as we check in with our two winners, Mitchell and Adam. You are both unmuted, and you're welcome to speak. If you'd like to do so, please go ahead. I'll pause for just a minute and see if anyone pops on.
I'll go ahead first. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And this is a really exciting project with some cool people involved. And I'm really excited to have learned about VAWP through my advisor, Scott Neubauer at VCU. And I really appreciate the financial and career support. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll go second. Can y'all hear me? I'm using my laptop mic, so it's not super great. I just want to thank y'all so much. We have a lot of new undergraduates in the lab, and getting them involved in research is sort of part of what this project is, since sites are so close to us. And of course, I want to thank my advisor, Dr. Atkinson, here at CNU, for introducing me to VAWP early last year, and it's been fantastic so far, and I'm looking forward to doing this project and reporting back to y'all a bit of what we find about conservation.
Thank you both. We do look forward to hearing your results. That is one of the conditions of the scholarship, and we're really excited to hear both from the undergraduate, graduate, and research on what you find. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Ricky Woody with our voting results.
Good afternoon, everybody. As you can tell, as an immediate past president, as Laura stated, we're really proud of how adaptable and the accomplishments that VAWP has done in this past year. We're really a strong organization and growing, and I encourage you to join and continue to participate in the committee, because we have a lot of exciting things going on. It's also with great pride as the immediate past president that you have Katie that's followed up and be a great leader as a president. But I want to announce the current and new leadership that'll be. Laura will move to the immediate past president, and Eli Wright will be your new vice president. John Lowenthal will continue in his role as the treasurer, and our close race for our secretary, but Alexi Weber ended up being selected as the new secretary for your upcoming new leadership. And we're all excited about the leadership and the support that we all as an organization is going to give this exceptional executive group. And we're going to continue to grow and be an influential factor in Virginia's natural resources, wetlands, environment, and a lot of the stuff coming up. It's a very exciting year ahead of us, and I think you'll really, really enjoy your participation. And I'll turn it back over to you now, Katie.
And I'll stay off off video for bandwidth purposes as we go through the rest of the board meeting. With education, Eli, you're up again.
Thanks so much. So for the Education Committee updates, the first thing I'd like to do is thank Dr. Wes Hudson. He was the chair of the committee through the beginning of last year, and did a lot of work trying to get things together, get us organized. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate his service there in that position. As far as just general committee updates, one of the things we were working on this year and trying to do, since we weren't able to necessarily have meetings and the likes, is trying to compile a list of different researchers and educators in wetlands throughout the Commonwealth. Try and make sure that we get a list that we can help to aid in communications for things like the scholarships, so that we have a solid mailing list that we can make these announcements and try to get as much participation as available, but also to have a list that we can, when we have research, we can do some collaboration and potentially have access and know what research is going on that we can help present in the future. So it's a slow process. There's actually a lot of great research that's going on across the state. But if anyone's got any, I would greatly appreciate if you're familiar with a particular institution, you might not know some of these researchers, you can feel free to send me a direct message, send me an email us on VAWP, and the message will get forwarded to me, or feel free to actually just type in the chat here. I think this is being recorded, so we'll be able to pull the information here. So if you know a professor or a program that's doing a lot of great wetland research, let me know the contact information so we can get them on that list and try to plug them in where possible. As Laura also mentioned, we're also going through trying to look at opportunities for future education events, doing different, either whether it might be webinars or in-person classes as the ongoing situation allows, but really trying to look at those opportunities. And again, if you've ever got any ideas or suggestions that we can help, that would really help to engage the membership, let me know. But with that, that's the Education Committee update.
Thank you. I'll turn this over to John Lowenthal.
Hello, everyone. As treasurer, let's see, at the end of 2019, we verified and our status as nonprofit with the IRS, and we have been in compliance with their maintaining our corporate structure with the state of Virginia. We have filed our taxes in 2019 and 2020, and the current balance in the bank is $13,166.48, and we are definitely trying to use the money to promote and keep wetland science going in the state of Virginia as the Education Committee is going strong. And so that's all I have to say. Thanks to all the members for participating, and everybody have a good day. Get muddy.
It's a good day for that. For Regulatory, Legal, and Archive, John, you're on video. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got on the video for this part of the program. Thanks. The report from archives is boxes of archives still sit here. We have some digitalized, but if anyone ever has burning interest on knowing anything about the history of VAWP in its early days, then we do have archives. The for the Regulatory Committee and Legal, I'd like to say first thank the Education Committee, because honestly, the programs that they put on this spring, a couple of them particularly were really legal and regulatory type matters, and so it was great to have them to put those on through the education webinar process. I thought that was a great thing that went on this spring, to tell you the truth, and maybe a silver lining from the pandemic and not being able to get together. My goal this year is to actually have more regulatory updates. It's something we used to have a newsletter, and I confess that sort of dropped off long ago. So I will take responsibility for putting some of those together as things come up. But I would also say that if anyone is interested in writing about something or sending out some sort of VAWP blast, or please email me and let me know, because I'm happy to help coordinate that. I think it's something we could probably, but I shouldn't say we, I should say it's something I could probably do a better job at. But that's the short answer. Thanks or short report. Thanks everybody, and look forward to hopefully seeing you in person this fall.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. With programs, Ben, take it away.
Hey, Ben Sager here. I'm acting program committee chair. The program committee handles, most of the event coordination and the planning, and we write up the event flyers and some of the announcements, and it can be a good bit of work. So we have a great committee of people that help me do some of that stuff. Don't really have a whole lot to report today since we're kind of closing out the spring webinar series, but I will say we are discussing the possibility of an in-person meeting that could happen in the fall. So just really hopeful that can happen. And I appreciate everyone for joining us with this spring webinar series.
Yeah, I'll encourage everyone when it's your time, go get your shot so we can all meet at Lewis Ginter again. The more people, the better off we'll be there. Thank you, Ben. And on to membership with Brian.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, quick update. Membership's down this year, obviously due to the pandemic. But again, just want to thank everyone associated with VAWP for all their hard work. Done a tremendous job of just providing great content and value during these times. So current membership now is floating around right at like 51. So we'd love to see those numbers jump back to sort of pre-pandemic type numbers. But again, just want to thank everyone at VAWP for all their hard work pulling this together and continuing to provide value, and looking forward to hopefully seeing everyone in the fall.
Thank you, Brian. Ways and means. I know, Carolyn, you said you weren't sure if your reception would hold out, but give it a try and we'll see if we can hear you.
I'm good, Katie. If you can hear me, thank you.
Yes, great.
The purpose of the Ways and Means Committee is to raise funds to meet the mission and the goals of this organization. As it has in the past, this committee will continue to work with the Programs Committee to explore any additional activities for all VAWP members. And as already has been stated, but please feel free to share any ideas for any type of activities you have with any board or committee member. And we are also looking to include funds in the upcoming budget to update our VAWP merchandise. I believe we've probably had the same shirts around for about the past 15 years. If you do have any suggestions on what items you'd like to purchase or to see VAWP sponsor, whether it's t-shirts, hats, koozies, any other kind of items you can think of, please feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts on those. And with that, turn it back to Katie.
Thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate it. And then, Ricky, if you could say a few words about nominations for those interested in running for an elected position in 2022.
Okay, the way the nominations work is usually in the fall, and this year we made the exception to push it off to the spring. We really encourage everybody to get involved in the committees and learn about the process of being there. The way that it works is that typically the way the bylaws are written is the vice president then rolls to the president from each year. So that's a mainly open position on an annual basis. And Eli is going to be a great vice president with the leadership, and that brings continuity and leadership. Our treasurer is set up on a 3-year term. So John's for continuity and funding, and John will be there for the next 3 years. And then we have the secretary position that is a continually position that is open each year and is competed on. And what we have found is people usually kind of move up through the organization, but also it's kind of an honor to be part of the committees. As you can hear from all the committee representatives that are here, they participated on this panel, on the executive leadership, and really care about what's going on in Virginia's environment. And I think that you will see great things, and I would encourage you to be aware when we start putting out things on the website, to think about being in the committee, become more involved, get to know the people that are engaged. Of the 51, let's double, triple that number really push this out there, and then we can see our leadership and continue to have strong leadership into the future, which is what we've had in the past, to get to this point that we are today. We have a good sound financial basis that John discussed, and I really think that the sky's the limit, and super, super encouraged about what we're going to accomplish, because under Laura's leadership and what we learned that we can do under COVID has really, really opened everybody's minds, as well as our hearts towards the environment and towards that science that's really, truly needed to continue to promote a great, strong natural resources in Virginia. So that's what I say. Get out there, be part of a committee, participate in some of the activities, and hopefully Ben will be successful and get us a room and all together in the fall, so we can meet each other and enjoy that social aspect that is really critical to our group. We've been friends for years. It's friends on friends. This business is kind of cyclic, and we're very close-knit group of people. And I think that when you join and participate with us, you're going to really, really find a home for your passions. And with that, I turn it back over to Katie.
Thank you, Ricky. And we'll move toward certification. Robin.
Yeah, hey there, folks. Well, 2020 was an interesting year. In 2017, the JLARC commissioned a study of to look at reducing regulation in Virginia. They were tasked basically to find a way to reduce regulation in Virginia by 25%. And they chose 2 existing boards for a test study to try to reduce regulation by 25%. And our soil scientists, geologists, wetlands professionals board was one of those that they were tasked to evaluate. They had a report come out in December of 2018 that basically tasked BPOR, the Board for Professional Occupational Regulation, to evaluate the need to continue certification and licensing for 7 regulatory bodies. And soil scientists and wetland delineators were put up on the chopping block. The reason for wetland delineators being evaluated as not being necessary was because they decided that the National Society of Wetland Scientists Professional Wetland Scientist certification was an equivalent certification, and that the PWD was unnecessary because the national PWS certification would provide the public with assurances of competency in wetland delineation. That obviously is not the case, but it put into play 2020. We had to begin to fight for the final report to not conclude that they were equivalent and that the PWD should be done away with.
And Rob, I think we're going to get auto cut off at 1:30.
Okay, well, anyway, we were able to save the program thanks to efforts of assistance of a bunch of people. We were able to get it saved. It was tremendous effort on a lot of people's part to do it, but we were able to save it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. And just wanted to again mention how grateful we are for the participation today, for the panelists, for Wetland Studies and Solutions for hosting today, along with all of our sponsors and presenters throughout this webinar series. Really just excited to be able to present this content in a way that is especially accessible, given some of the financial constraints I know that some of our membership organizations are under. So thank you again. I look forward to serving you as president in 2021. I look forward to working with Laura as past president, Eli as vice president, and the rest of the board and everyone else to continue providing excellent content and good sharing of ideas, and hopefully soon some socialization. And with that, I would, Laura, is there anything else we need to add before we close it out?
I don't believe so. Looking forward to the next year. You're going to do great.
Wonderful. Well, take care all. Thank you.